Shisha is a Persian word. Shisha means bottle. So it basically, you burn the tobacco and when you inhale, it passes through water.
Nicotine gives you a feel good factor. There's an instant gratification or good feeling, and brain starts asking, craving for that.
Nicotine can also have side effects. The effect of nicotine is very, very fast. Nicotine will release some chemicals which will lead to vasoconstriction, which will cause some constriction of the vessels, of the heart, of the brain, and elsewhere in the body. It can lead to increase in the heart rate. It can actually lead to strokes.
Vaping word comes from vapor. One puff actually may give you nicotine equal to maybe a pack of cigarettes. It has far more addictive potential than a cigarette. It is not safe. The smoke is passing through a filter, whereas for the other person, it's actually coming from the burning end of the cigarette. So that actually has more. So the exposure for the second-hand person is actually more than the person who's smoking. So the person who's sitting next to me is actually inhaling worse smoke than I'm inhaling.
Hookah versus BD, BD versus cigarette, cigarette versus shisha, and then now we have vaping, e-cigarette. It's going to be, it is big in the last 20 years. Some e-cigarettes can give you a very high dose of nicotine. You have refills available which can give you even lethal dose of nicotine, so to say.
Cigarette, yes, is like scotch where there is a quality control, and this is like tharra with no quality control, and because of that there are numerous reports from across the world of all kinds of damages happening and deaths happening. Children are exposed to second-hand smoke and then this tertiary method of smoking also. There is now awareness about this being a major risk, particularly for causing health problems like asthma and these kind of problems in children.
Even if you conceive and the lady continues to kind of smoke, the chances of you having a miscarriage are more. You might have a conception, but you will not have a baby.
Smoking and pregnancy is a very deadly combination where the baby gets badly damaged. Another problem with e-cigarettes is when you have that coil burning, there's a lot of, it's a metal. So nickel, cobalt and many other these heavy metals, their particles can evaporate, go into the lung and cause cancer.
Hello and welcome to HT's weekly talk show, The Interview, and our news segment, Health with Hindustan Times. In this series, we will focus on issues concerning our health and well-being, issues that touch a chord and those which need to be addressed. And this we will do through a panel of specialists, experts and doctors from ground zero. Last week, we spoke about the HMPV virus and helped dispel fears and explode myths. This week, we will focus on smoking and why doctors think that nicotine is not the villain it is made out to be. What is vaping? Why is it more dangerous than smoking? And the facts about shisha and hookah. Which of these is the lesser devil? And if we must, what should we opt for? Cigarette, hookah, shisha, BD, or go for vaping? A tough choice, and many questions which we will attempt to answer in our news segment, Health with Hindustan Times, in our weekly talk show, The Interview. Before we begin, let me introduce Dr. Arvind Kumar, Chairman, Institute of Chest Surgery at Medanta Hospital. A chest and lung transplant surgeon, Dr. Kumar brings with him 35 years of clinical experience. A founder trustee of Lung Care Foundation, his focus areas are clean air, smoking and vaping. We also have with us Dr. Amit Dhamija, Senior Consultant and Pulmonologist at Sir Gangaram Hospital. He brings with him over 2 decades of experience and has a sea of patients battling with the ill effects of smoking. Welcome to the show, Dr. Kumar and Dr. Dhamija, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you very much for having us on this show on a very important topic of smoking and vaping. Thank you for choosing this topic and thank you for inviting us here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Let me begin with the basics and ask you, Dr. Kumar, what are the components of smoking and what are the different kinds of smoking and the different kinds of smokers?
The components of smoke or cigarette smoke can be basically divided into two categories. One is nicotine and other is other chemicals, and there are nearly 4,000 plus chemicals which have been identified in the cigarette bidi smoke, and nearly 100 plus out of those 4,000 have been designated as carcinogens, which means they can cause cancer. The smokers we can divide into active, which means the person who smokes, and passive. Now, who is a passive smoker or a second-hand smoker? The people sitting in the vicinity who inhale, because when you hold it in your hand, there is smoke which is filling up that area, and when you exhale. So, the people in the vicinity from the family, from friends, they are the passive smokers.
And what are the different kinds of smoking?
So, different kinds of smoking could be cigarette, bidi, hookah, cigar. These are four different formats where primarily it is the tobacco which is used, but the method of packaging it and using it differs from one to the other.
Dr. Dhamija, would shisha also be included in the different kinds of smoking?
Shisha is a Persian word. Shisha means bottle. So it basically, you burn the tobacco and when you inhale it passes through water. So shisha and hookah are technically the same. The type of smoking that you get in either of the two is going to be exactly the same.
Aren't the components somewhat different? Because to my mind, hookah is more rural. And my next question actually was about the distinction between rural smokers and urban smokers. While shisha is elite, urban, and we have
Shisha
these so-called shisha bars or hookah bars.
When you talk about hookah being consumed in the rural setting, they have a very unflavored and very unrefined form of nicotine and tobacco that you are using. So the filter is less, it is more raw. Many people will not like the taste if they're not used to. When you talk about shisha, it is used more in terms of younger people and in the parlance of partying and being more into it. Shisha is more flavored. You can have a milder form of tobacco, you can have flavored tobacco, you can have more refined tobacco, and you can even have some filters which are placed there to make it more attractive towards the younger generation. You consider it to be less toxic, that's why you consume that. So shisha is a more refined form of hookah, but the basic remains the same. Ultimately, you are burning tobacco and inhaling tobacco through when it passes through water.
Let me put this differently. How would you or would you distinguish between rural and urban smokers?
Hookah is more common in rural setting. Shisha is more common because we have many youngsters hooking on to hookah bars and shisha bars. It is more fashionable for young children. Bidi is more prevalent among the lower socioeconomic status, very obviously because it costs less than what a cigarette would cost. But at the same time, it is an unfiltered form of tobacco and an unpure form of tobacco. The carcinogenicity, the amount of nicotine might be a little higher in the bidi as compared to what you get in a cigarette, because cigarette you will have a filter. So cigarette is more common in more affluent people who can afford that. In rural setting and a lower socioeconomic category, you will have more bidi smoking because of the economic constraints more than anything else.
Is it that, or is it, as one had heard, right or wrong, that since bidi does not have paper, it is less harmful? And after that, Dr. Kumar, nicotine being less harmful. So let's begin with this.
As far as burning of the paper is concerned, that is really not the major cause of any harmful effects that a cigarette would cause. Beetle and paper both come from wood. It is basically a wrapping that you get through that, but it is basically the tobacco which burns and causes the side effects and all the carcinogens which enters the bloodstream and causes all these effects in the long run. So as far as side effects of one over the other is concerned, there's nothing to choose between the two. We should not have either. But at the same time, both are equally harmful. And we have studies from the US where BD is imported as a cheaper form, and there it is being promoted as a lesser toxic form of cigarette somehow, and it is available online. It is a cheaper option. Now they have studies which show that the content of nicotine and some other chemicals which they can actually quantify is a little more in BDs as compared to what you get in cigarettes.
So, Dr. Kumar, while on nicotine, when we were talking, you had said that nicotine is the least harmful, while the myth, if I may say, was that it is the nicotine which is the killer.
So, cigarette or BD or hookah or cigar, let's say tobacco smoke. When you burn tobacco in any of these four, it gives you nicotine, and it also side by side gives you nearly 4,000 of those chemicals. Now, nicotine gets absorbed from the lungs very quickly, goes to the blood, goes to our brain, crosses the blood-brain barrier and leads to dopamine release, which gives you a feel-good factor. You know, there's an instant gratification or good feeling. That is an addicting habit, and couple of such actions and brain starts asking, craving for that, and it is the nicotine which leads to addiction. Paradoxically, apart from addicting you to this substance, there isn't much of health side effect of nicotine. Far more health effects come from the other chemicals which go side by side, which have cancer causing agents and other agents which damage the lung, because that's the portal of entry, and then from the lung wall they get absorbed into the blood and go to every organ from brain to toe, causing all kinds of problems. So, nicotine is the one which leads to addiction, and then other chemicals are the one which actually lead to all the harmful effects of tobacco.
So, I'm going to address this to both of you about the other myths. One, of course, about nicotine is dispelled, about the other myths of smoking and the ill effects.
The effect of nicotine is very, very fast. You have one or two puffs. Within a couple of seconds, it will reach the brain. It is absorbed directly from the lungs into the blood and hits the brain very fast. Nicotine will release some chemicals which will lead to vasoconstriction, which will cause some constriction of the vessels, of the heart, of the brain, and elsewhere in the body. It can lead to increase in the heart rate. It can actually lead to strokes. Other myths which people have is hookah versus BD, BD versus cigarette, cigarette versus shisha. And then now we have vaping, e-cigarette. It's going to be, it is big in the last 20 years. And people are actually getting addicted and hooked on to e-cigarettes, and they feel that it is, less toxic. But as far as the effect of e-cigarettes is concerned, we realize the effects of chemicals that we inhale in cigarettes after 200 to 300 years of use. E-cigarettes have been in place only in about 20 years. We still do not know. They have very many chemicals which are still undiscovered. We really do not know what it constitutes, what all we inhale when we are when we are vaping, and what all chemical and ill effects it can affect and can have on the body. Maybe in the years down the line, when we have more people using it, when we have more prolonged exposure, these effects might come into picture. But we should not dispel that e-cigarettes is more fashionable, it is easy to use, it is less harmful, and therefore we should take it. It is definitely addicting. Some e-cigarettes can give you a very high dose of nicotine. You have refills available which can give you even lethal dose of nicotine, so to say. And of course, we do not know about the ill effects at all.
Vaping, of course, we have to discuss in greater detail.
Okay.
But Dr. Kumar, some other myths.
So, one more myth is that many people feel that it is the smoker alone who gets the damage. Lot of people are not aware that anyone who's present in the vicinity, who's actually inhaling the second-hand smoke, gets actually more damage, because the person who's inhaling the smoke is passing through a filter, whereas for the other person it's actually coming from the burning end of the cigarette. So that actually has more. So the exposure for the second-hand person is actually more than the person who's smoking, and that also leads to all the health ill effects which are known to occur in the primary smoker.
Which means what we call or presume is a second-hand smoker or person or passive is actually, in one sense, a first-hand smoker.
Or worse smoker.
Okay. Just explain that.
Yeah. So the exposure of the person who is taking second-hand smoke is actually more than the person who's smoking, because he's taking it through the filter. So there is a cotton filter in the most of the cigarettes these days, filtered cigarettes. So your smoke is passing through that. So a lot of particulate matter and some other chemicals also can get trapped there, whereas the burning end is releasing smoke directly. So the person who is sitting next to me is actually inhaling worse smoke than I am inhaling.
So he's at a greater risk.
He is at a greater risk, yeah.
And for every 5 people who smoke, if we attribute, say, 6 deaths, 5 will be active smokers. One of the deaths could be passive smokers also. So it is not that they do not suffer the side effects. They actually are exposed to all these chemicals which a smoker is, in case they have prolonged exposure.
And would you agree with Dr. Kumar when he says that the passive smoker is more at a risk?
Not more, but definitely at a risk. You inhale the unfiltered smoke, but at the same time, you maybe are at a distance. You're not smoking 20 or 30. You might be there in the room for only half an hour, where the person might smoke just 2. So the effective amount of smoke that you inhale will be less, but the amount of smoke that you inhale is more toxic because it is getting to you unfiltered.
And in case you are present for every smoke which the primary smoker is taking,
then of course it becomes worse for you. Then of course it becomes worse.
So when we take history for our lung cancer cases, in the spouse, the exposure of a non-smoking spouse to a smoking spouse's person is also taken as a risk factor.
Definitely.
Okay, so we will come to that also. What about invisible smoking? And this is a phrase I have coined myself, because Dr. Kumar, you were speaking about dangers of it being embedded in sofas and carpets.
Yeah. So when you have smoking going on for quite some time, some of this smoke settles down on the carpets, sofa, curtains, etc., etc. And when you have small kids playing on the carpet, on the sofa, or playing with the curtains, that dust actually gets released and the children tend to inhale that. That's been called tertiary smoke, and that also is a health risk for the children of the smokers.
What I am able to decode or understand, that if you don't use ashtrays, then it goes into the curtains, sofas, carpets. But if you're using ashtrays,
even if you use the ashtrays, that all that smoke which is there, the smoke when you release, if the room is filled with smoke, that smoke also has particles as well as gases, chemicals, and all that can also settle. So gross ash is different. You can put the gross ash in an ashtray, but invisible ash, invisible particles also settle in due course of time and actually make a substantial volume, which is a health risk for the children. So children are exposed to second-hand smoke and then this tertiary method of smoking also.
Dr. Dhameja, would you agree with the sofa curtain fact which Dr. Kumar is talking about, or would you dismiss that as a kind of a non-issue or not a priority area?
Not really, because what we're dealing with in tertiary smoking is children. We are people at a very vulnerable stage of their lives when their growth is happening, and if anybody is exposed to smoke during their developmental years, it is going to lead to a far more difficult consequences later in life, which we will never be able to quantify. Children are most vulnerable to tertiary smoking, and that is the age group where we should be most protective about. So definitely tertiary smoking is a known issue. It is not talked about because we don't have conclusive numbers, we don't have data.
Why is it that there is no data? Is it not important enough? Is it an area which is unexplored? Or is it an area which is not worth tapping?
See, it's an identified area, but when you are talking of active smoking, when you are talking of passive smoking, and when you are talking of this tertiary smoking, maybe the priority is 1, 2, 3 like that, and that's why there isn't so much data. But there is now awareness about this being a major risk, particularly for causing health problems like asthma and these kind of problems in children, because the particles which they inhale, it causes chest problems in them.
Dr. Dhameja?
Anybody who has any allergic history, somebody who has sneezing, coughing, postnasal drip, or has a wheezing tendency, if you inhale smoke or if you inhale the particles which are there in the smoke, you definitely become more prone to develop these diseases. Many children will get asthma because of smoking. So all these things are important not only for the smoker but for everybody else in the family, more so in case you have a history of asthma or sinusitis or upper respiratory allergies in the family. It becomes very, very important.
Dr. Dhameja, while you're talking of it affecting families, you had spoken about pregnant women being adversely affected by smoking. You had mentioned about it leading to infertility.
So basically, when we smoke, there are tons of chemicals which we inhale. A couple of them, many of them will have an oxidative damage in the body. So they will not allow the cells to function normally as they would. They would deplete the hemoglobin of the oxygen that is carried in the blood, and many of them will be causing vasoconstriction. So in the way, suppose a man will be affected because he can have an erectile dysfunction. He might not have an erection. There might also be a chance that the sperm count might come down. There might be a chance that the sperm motility will come down. That is how it affects, fertility in a male. As far as the female counterpart goes, even if you conceive and the lady continues to kind of smoke, the chances of you having a miscarriage are more. You might have a conception, but you will not have a baby. And at the same time, you will have many birth defects, which are more commonly seen in ladies who are smoking while pregnancy, and also in their husbands if they are smoking when the lady is pregnant. If you are in the same room and you are exposed to passive smoke, the chances of congenital defects, many forms of congenital defects will be more in the children. You can have premature deliveries. You can have retarded growth. Not only if the children will be having a retarded growth in case they are exposed to either smoking by the mother or anybody else in the family.
Dr. Kumar, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, it's a known fact that pregnant ladies who are smokers have higher incidence of congenital defects, intrauterine growth retardation, intrauterine death, premature delivery, and a whole lot of perinatal problems. So these kids, even if they are born, they are likely to have more post-birth problems than a child from a lady who was not smoker. And when we say smoker, it is lady smoking actively as well as lady being forced to smoke passively because of the husband or someone else in the family smoking. So smoking and pregnancy is a very deadly combination where the baby gets badly damaged.
And there's a specific syndrome called sudden infant death syndrome, where you leave the baby in the cot or on the bed and suddenly he or she stops breathing and he or she is dead for no reason. Even the incidence of SIDS is seen more commonly in children who are exposed to smoking either from the mother or the father. Child who is apparently normal would go to bed, maybe in a cot or in the bed, and would not just wake up. What happens is still a mystery, but it is seen that SIDS also is seen more commonly in children whose parents are smokers.
Yeah. There is an association of SIDS happening in parents who are smokers.
Any research done on that so far?
It is mostly asphyxiation maybe, but it can actually lead to a transient closing of the airway canal where you have some irritant, some smoke which is going in. The child is hyperreactive and suddenly there is asphyxia. So the exact mechanism is still a question mark, but that is what you can postulate out of it.
It's a known thing, yeah.
Now I'm going to move on to Dr. Kumar's favorite, and I'm using the word favorite in a negative sense, subject of vaping. Dr. Kumar, would you decode the why and how of it? What is vaping? Is it synonymous with e-cigarettes? And take us through the entire gamut.
So, e-cigarette, vaping, vapes, what does it mean? So, this vaping word comes from vapor. So, when you heat an ether, a volatile liquid, it evaporates and forms a vapor. So, these are products where you use a volatile liquid and somehow heat it to produce a vapor as an equivalent of tobacco smoke, cigarette smoke. So, that is why we have this word vaping. E-cigarettes, because this was started in 2003 by a Chinese pharmacist whose father, who was a smoker, had died of lung cancer. He himself was a smoker and he wanted to get rid of that, and he developed this method of taking nicotine minus the other things. And since it looked like a cigarette but was in an electronic form, he gave it a term e-cigarette, and it's also known as ENDS, which stands for Electronic Nicotine Delivery System. Very rightly nicknamed ENDS, because it brings your end. I think they didn't realize, but actually the truth has come out. So what does it have? It has basically 4 components. There is a mouthpiece, there is a tank which is filled with a volatile liquid, which are mostly some kind of ether, and all kinds of flavoring agents and other things are also added, one of which is nicotine, which is added. So it's a mixture of different liquids. Then there is a heating coil, behind which there is a battery. When you inhale, that battery gets activated, which heats the coil to somewhere around 100 to several hundred degrees Celsius, which heats up the liquid, leading to production of vapor, which comes out. So you inhale that and then you exhale. So it gives that simulation as if you are smoking. Now, when it came, there were 3 promises, or rather 3 points which were used to propagate and market it. Number 1, it is totally safe. There is no side effect. It's not a health risk. So it was proposed as a healthy alternative to smoking. Secondly, that it will help smokers quit smoking and become non-smokers. And third, very importantly, it will prevent non-smokers who have not yet taken to smoking converting to smokers. These were the 3 promises with which it came with a bang. 2003 in China, 2007 it started being exported to Europe and US. In few years, it became a $1 billion industry there, and so is it in India. It's spreading like wildfire. You go to any market and you will see teenagers hooked onto it. When the research was done after a couple of years of its use, it was found that all these 3 are false promises. Number 1, it is not safe. So the amount of nicotine which is actually present in this liquid is many times more than the amount of nicotine you take through one cigarette. So one puff actually may give you nicotine equal to maybe a pack of cigarettes. So there is more nicotine you are inhaling, which means it has far more addictive potential than a cigarette. Number 2, when research was done to see if smokers are able to become non-smokers with the help of this, the answer was actually opposite. They actually could not quit and they continued.
Just explain this to me.
So it was proposed that those who are smokers and are addicted to smoking, if they shift to e-cigarette, they will be able to slowly quit smoking. But in reality, it did not happen.
Why?
So this also has nicotine. So people were actually getting addicted to both. The smoking incidence did not go down. Second, and this was where the companies used very smart and very focused, harsh marketing in the teenagers, which were earlier not a target for smoking. That used to start in late teens, but here early teenagers were marketed, which was a much huge market, and it was promoted to them as a very safe thing to do, hep thing to do. And what was seen was that many kids who started with this seemingly harmless habit soon converted to smoking. Again, it's a habit. You get addicted to nicotine, and once you are addicted to one form of substance abuse, you are likely to convert to the other. So it is not safe because it gives you many more times nicotine than a cigarette gives you. It has ether. So from that, third, numerous other toxic chemicals go inside. There are all kinds of flavoring agents which are added. Nobody knows what is the effects of those on the lungs. And fourthly, unlike cigarette, which is a regulated market, this is a totally unregulated market. Every house may actually have a small factory at the backside. If I was to give a simile, it could be between a standard brand of whiskey versus desi sharab, which is made in houses. Nobody knows what is the component being used, and oftentimes we have all kinds of poisons accidentally added, which leads to death. Likewise, when you have cheapest variety of ether being bought by a seller because he wants to make money, who knows how many toxic chemicals are coming because there is no quality control.
In fact, in your conversation, you had said cigarettes are like Scotch whiskey or a good brand,
Exactly.
while vaping is like a tharra.
Like, so cigarette, yes, is like Scotch where there is a quality control, and this is like tharra with no quality control, and because of that there are numerous reports from across the world of all kinds of damages happening and deaths happening, and even deaths in large numbers. So, it is not safe, it causes huge number of health problems, it does not convert smokers to non-smokers, and it converts many not yet smokers into smokers. So, if you take it in a totality, it is a huge damage and huge health risk. Worst of all, this is promoted as a safe alternative. Sad thing is that lot of parents who otherwise would oppose their children from taking to smoking allow their children to take to e-vaping because they think it's safe and it doesn't cause any harm, which actually is leading to a rapid increase in its popularity, causing more harm.
Dr. Dhameja, you spoke about the kick. Now, the kick in vaping, in shisha, hookah and cigarettes, normal cigarettes.
So the kick that you get comes from nicotine. So the kick that you get after consuming a cigarette in case you inhale smoke is going to be very, very rapid, maybe a fraction of a second or maybe within a few seconds. As soon as it reaches the brain, it releases the feel-good chemicals. You have dopamine, you'll have endorphins, you'll have serotonin, which will make you feel good, you feel fresh, you feel more energized, you feel more active, you feel that you can work more. It gives you kind of a euphoria kind of feeling which you get very addicted to, and this feeling makes it more addictive. What happens is as time progresses, you also develop some tolerance to nicotine. So if one cigarette used to give you enough kick for a day, for a particular age, if you consume for 5 years, you need 5 cigarettes to do the same to you. If you take for 20 years, you need 10 cigarettes to get the kick. So the tolerance to nicotine grows in the body. You need more nicotine to give you the same effect as 1 or 2 cigarettes would do starting at a younger age. And at the same time, it becomes a craving thing. As soon as the effect of nicotine goes away, mind asks for more. So you start being euphoric, you become tolerant, but then ultimately you become dependent. So the kick that you get is only initially. Then you start relating it to your work, your stress levels. डॉक्टर साहब मैं बाहर 2 सिगरेट पीने जाता हूँ because उसके बिना तो कुछ हो ही नहीं सकता काम, दिन ही नहीं शुरू होता हमारा. That is what you see many people talking about. So it is initially the kick, but in the last stage, once you become hooked to it for so many years, it is the craving and the withdrawal which actually is much more troublesome as the kind of euphoria that you get in 1 or 2 cigarettes when you're actually starting to smoke.
Dr. Dhameja, you told me that vaping has taken school children into its fold much more than cigarette smoking has.
In case you go to buy a cigarette in the market, you have to be 18 or 21. But as far as vaping is concerned, it is kind of illegal to sell, but we all know it is available everywhere. And actually, as Dr. Arvind rightly said, it was being promoted in children as a safer option. You don't get hooked to cigarette, you get hooked to e-cigarettes. It is going to be safer for you without any side effects. And then it was being marketed to school children in various shapes and sizes. You get a pen, you get something like a pen drive. It is that small, it is that sleek. Your teacher would not even know to it in case he or she sees that it is. They would just ignore it as a article in your pencil box or a geometry box, and that is how it became promoted among children. That is, and of course you do not have to burn anything. You don't need to have a light to use e-vaping device. So that is what it came to forefront as far as young people and young children are concerned. And it comes in various fancy shapes and sizes. If you see what you get in the market, you'll be actually tempted to do it yourself. And children at the vulnerable age, just to gain acceptance into the peer group, just to get the sheer pleasure, maybe just try it once mentality, they would actually get hooked to the effect of nicotine very, very fast as it.
So what had happened was, because of very aggressive
marketing
campaigning against tobacco, the sales of tobacco companies had actually started going down, and they were looking for fresh sources of revenue. And this e-cigarette came as a rescue for them at the right time. And while pushing it among smokers, they also suddenly discovered a possible huge market for it in the children. And that is why when it was marketed, safe was the first thing which was, oh, it's safe. It was so heavily promoted as a safe mechanism, because this is how they could push it amongst the teenagers, which was many times the size of the market of the adult smokers. One. Two, lot of flavors were added.
Yeah.
So smoke comes in only one, cigarette comes as one packet. But here you can have chocolate flavor, mint flavor, mango flavor, this flavor, ice added to that. So lots of flavoring agents were added, which used to make it more liked by children. And the last thing is why it increased. When you have a cigarette pack, you consume 5. You look at the pack, out of 10, you've taken 5 since morning. There's a little fear, oh, मैंने सुबह से 5 पी ली हैं. Here, there is no
Quantum.
of the numbers. You pick it up, you take a puff and you exhale. Since morning, how many puffs you have taken? There's no count of that. So it will go on. The supplier will give you another cartridge. The moment it's over, you put another cartridge. So the amount being inhaled was actually much more, which was to the liking of the companies, but at the cost of health effects in the children. And this is the reason, all these reasons, that it increased like wildfire. Not increase, it is there. I mean, it's not something which came and went away. Today, it's a major problem.
My next question, which is addressed to both of you and which both of you will reject outright, but I will still ask. If one must, what should one opt for between smoking, vaping, hookah or shisha? Which is the lesser devil, so to speak?
The lesser devil, all are equally bad. Technically, e-cigarettes are less harmful, but it is only because we do not know of the harm. This tobacco came into existence in the 17th century, but it is only in the 20th century that we kind of realized the ill effects. E-cigarettes have been in the market for only 20 years. So we might see a gamut of diseases which were probably unheard of now, which might unfold, say, 50 years, 100 years down the line. So we should not say that it is safe. It is just that we do not know. It comes with a caveat.
Dr. Kumar?
I would refrain from choosing any of these. You said cigarette, hookah,
Shisha,
e-cigarettes. All are containing poison and all are damaging you.
Which is the lesser devil?
I don't think there is any lesser devil in the 4, but as Dr. Dhamija said, regarding cigarette, which has been around for over 100 years, we very well know its whole range of health ill effects. So it appears, because of lack of data, that e-cigarette out of the 4 is the least harmful. It is only because we today know very little about the harmful effects of it, but whatever little is known is more frightening than the cigarette smoke.
Cigarettes versus shisha?
Equally bad.
Both are
Equally
poisons. It's like you say you take potassium cyanide versus hydrogen cyanide. My answer is none.
Dr. Kumar, what is the worst case scenario vis-a-vis health? How serious can this get and how fatal is it? You are a lung transplant surgeon, hence I ask.
So when you inhale, these chemicals go to the lung. So that's the portal of entry. So first damage and maximum damage happens in the lungs. It can cause swelling in the lining of the windpipe. It damages the lining of our alveoli. There it gets absorbed and goes into the blood. So starting from cough, higher incidence of asthma, COPD, chronic bronchitis, lung cancer, and ultimately destroying the lungs. Now, I would like to mention here 2 of my personal cases. So, about 3 months back, I had the misfortune of operating on a young boy in his early 20s, and this boy had been vaping for last 3 to 4 years, and one day he suddenly developed chest pain. He had an X-ray which showed air around the lungs. We call it pneumothorax. And a CT scan was done which shows severe bilateral lung damage where big parts of the lung had converted into kind of balloon-like structures, and then he came to us and almost half of his lung had to be cut out directly because of the 3 to 4 years of vaping. From lungs, it gets absorbed, it goes to the brain. So, all kinds of attention deficit is one of the commonest things. People become, their performance goes down, the memory goes down, their concentration decreases, their brain function becomes less, they are not able to do as well as they were doing earlier. Heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up, there are cases of heart attacks described, and then all other organs can suffer damage. And e-cigarette, we are discovering more and more as the data is accumulating. Another problem with e-cigarettes is when you have that coil burning, there is a lot of, it's a metal. So, nickel, cobalt and many other these heavy metals, their particles can evaporate, go into the lung and cause cancer.
Dr. Dhavija, is shisha a contributory factor?
Any form of tobacco, be it shisha or cigarettes or cigarettes, is going to cause the same effects because ultimately it is a carcinogenic and the oxidative stress which the body suffers because of all this. And it starts from, even the first puff. People have seen that as compared to non-smokers, people who have just 1 cigarette or 2 cigarettes a day will have at least 50% chances of developing these illnesses or these disorders as compared to somebody who's never smoked. So it is not about shisha or hookah. In case you have any kind of a combustion of tobacco and you inhale those particles and carcinogens and the particulate matter and the smoke, we are all going to have the same side effects and complications as would any other tobacco product would do.
You were talking about the legal status of vaping and you said it is actually completely illegal. And when we were talking, you said a person selling it can be arrested.
Yes.
But the same doesn't hold good for someone who's consuming it. So can you just decode this for me?
So, there is this law which was enacted in 2019 which prohibited the production, storage, import, export, transport or selling or advertising of e-cigarette and vaping related groups. But out of all the names which are mentioned, there are about 7 different categories which are mentioned in that law. Everything is actually happening on the ground except advertising. So, you won't see any advertisement anywhere for e-cigarette. The person using it is the best advertiser because suppose there are 2 kids who are using it, they call 2 more kids. So, peer suggestion, they, oh, come on, try it. So, peer pressure, they try it and within a few puffs they get hooked onto it. So, first puff is offered free and thereafter you have to expand and this chain goes on expanding. So, the sad part is that despite an effective law existing, but implementation of that law is where a lot of action still is needed.
I know the last word when I request you for our viewers is going to be don't smoke, stay away from vaping, everything is bad, drink only water, like Dr. Kumar says. However, what is the last word you would like to give to our viewers?
As a doctor, I think it's a big responsibility on the medical community to reach this information to the masses that e-cigarette vaping is not safe, it does not convert smokers into non-smokers and it does not prevent non-smokers from converting to smokers. So, don't fall prey to a wrong advertisement, know the fact and please you stay away from it and do everything to keep your children away from it.
Dr. Dhavija?
Make sure that you, your family, people around you, your friends, do not even take the 1 puff which you might use, say, as a company for somebody else. Don't do that because once your brain starts reacting to it, it will be impossible for you to do away with the kick that you get.
You should learn to say no.
On that note of caution and note of hope, let me thank both of you, Dr. Arvind Kumar and Dr. Amit Dhavija, for your time, for being here with us and really educating all our viewers on smoking, vaping, shisha, hookah, which of course is synonymous. And thank you very much for also busting the myths.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks
so much.
to
Thanks so
you
much.
and HT Media for inviting us and also for taking up this very,
Very, very
important
important topic.
topic.
Thank you very much.